So let's start with the class. So first of all, auspicious greetings to everyone that is here in person at Shilai Temple. Thank you. As well as those that are joining in online. So quick introduction about myself. My name is Venerable Huize. That's my Dharma name. And I'm in charge of interfaith outreach, social education department in Shilai Temple. So basically anything that is to do with organizing classes as well as activities, that will be the job of our department. So those that are just in, please be seated. You can sit anywhere. And so about the class that we are having this fall, I will be basing my the core teachings class on this book, which is named "Or for All Living Beings: A Guide to Buddhist Practice." And basically, this book, it's available in our tea house as well as the bookstore. Over at the bookstore, if you are here, you can go grab a copy. But if you're joining in online and you're not living here in Los Angeles, you can always go to Buddhist Light publication, as well as it's available on as well. And this book, the name that is in English, it's not quite informative about what this book is about, because in Chinese it will sound more like the three learnings, the three trainings of humanistic Buddhism. In Chinese, it's called 人间佛教的戒定慧. So it's the three learnings of humanistic Buddhism. I'll go through what that is about. So in the introduction or the preface of the book, our founder, the Venerable Master, said that when a young monk enters the monastic order as a novice monk, he will be called Qin Xi. And what this two Chinese character means is the second one. It means Xi is to quiet or to calm one's own mind. Signifies that the person will strive to quiet the three poisons, that is greed, anger, and ignorance of one's own mind. And then the first character, Qin, is diligence or effort. It indicates that this person will diligently pursue what is called the threefold trainings of Buddhism. There's the cultivation of morality, meditative concentration, and wisdom. And throughout this course, I will emphasize more about why is it so important that we need to go through this threefold training, specifically this three. And it is through this diligent pursuit of the threefold training that one can quiet or calm the three poison, that is the greed, anger, and ignorance. So it goes, the three poisons goes by three, and the threefold training, it goes by three as well. And so in the threefold trainings, although the example given was for a novice monk to sort of train himself, but this is not just for monastics, not just for monks and nuns, but it is for all Buddhists everywhere. And in fact, just like the title of this book is for all living beings. And just like all the great sages and bodhisattvas have undergone the threefold training, it is a teaching that is shared between all the different lineages of Buddhism, whether you're from Mahayana, Vajrayana, or Theravada. So basically, East Asian, Chinese Buddhism, and then you have the Tibetan Buddhism as well as South Asian Buddhism. So all these different lineages, they are alike, as in we will need to go through the threefold trainings. And for the Buddhist scriptures as well, Buddhist scripture is known as the three Pitaka, or in this diagram over here, it is been depicted as the free basket, because that is literally what it means in Sanskrit. the three baskets. So these three baskets, or the Tripitaka, is the core Buddhist canons that is divided into three divisions. That is the Sutra, Vinaya, as well as Abhidhamma. So even the Tripitaka, it goes by three. So the Sutra contains the discourses of the Buddha and offer many teachings and developing our meditative concentration. So the sutra has more to do with meditation. Vinaya details the discipline, rules, and morality of the Buddhist monastic order as well as the lay community. And the Abhidharma collects the analytic and commentatorial tradition, which focuses on the cultivation of wisdom. So the Sutra, Vinaya, Abhidharma also goes with the threefold training of the morality, meditation, as well as wisdom. So in fact, morality, meditation, and wisdom, or over here it's been translated as precept, meditation, and wisdom. Anyone approaching the Buddhist teaching must bring the threefold trainings into their everyday thinking and living. So in this book, For All Living Being, it serves as a guide for us to be able to start some kind of threefold training. So as long as you're able to follow the path of the threefold training, then you will be able to deepen your spiritual path within humanistic Buddhism. And so for the Venerable Master, he has long advocated the humanistic Buddhism and sought to integrate Buddhism into human life. As in his belief, if Buddhism has no use to human society, then it's not a Buddhism that should exist. When a Buddhism should exist in society to be able to benefit all living beings. And so nevertheless, humanistic Buddhism should maintain both the traditional Buddhism at its core and also to continually the threefold trainings, which is morality, meditative concentration, and wisdom. So in fact, if you looked into the table of contents of this book, it's basically arranged in a way that it goes through all these three different trainings. So part one is covering morality, which is basically the discipline or precept. Part two is meditative concentration. And then part three will be wisdom. And so for the 10 classes in this course, we would be talking about all these three degrees or phases of the threefold trainings. For our first class, we'll be talking about the reason or the source of this precept. Why was the precept being formulated? Why does the Buddha, after he had started but the Buddhist community or the Buddhist Sangha, had wanted his disciples to have a sort of discipline or a sort of precept? So the name of the chapter is The Right Form for the Right Time, as in you will need to be able to adapt this precept according to its time as well. And so as history goes, more than 2,500 years ago, the Buddha entered his final nirvana after teaching the Dharma or the Buddhist teaching for 49 years. But before he passed, the Buddha instructed his disciple to take the code of monastic conduct he had built over the course of his life, the Buddhist precept, and look to it, the Buddhist precept, as their teacher in his absence. So what that basically means is when the Buddha had entered into nirvana and he is no longer with us, we need to see the Buddhist precept as our teacher and to seek guidance from the Buddhist precepts. And since then, generation after generations of followers have been able to learn the Dharma because of the preservation of these precepts. And in fact, there is a Buddhist saying that as long as the precepts abide, so too will the monastic order. And as long as the monastic order abides, so too will the Dharma. So what that means is that if the monastic order abides to the precept, then it will maintain itself. It won't fall apart. And when the monastic precept is able to maintain itself, it will also continue on to propagate the Dharma, which is the Buddha's teaching. So this is how Buddhism has endured over time. And all those who wish to shave their head or to renounce wear the robe of a monastic must be ordained through a formal ceremony into taking the precept. So that is from formulated the monastic rules and precept to regulate the monastic order and thus ensure that the right Dharma endures. And what the right Dharma is about is the original or pure form that the Buddha had taught. And it will maintain itself as long as we are able to follow with his precept. Are not only observed by the monastic order. So it's not just monastic precept, but in fact, there's a lot of precept for the lay community as well. So the precepts are the basis for all good deeds and the cornerstone of all moral conducts. And one who observes the precept is like a student who follows school regulations and the citizens who abide by the law. So the difference is that between these two is that school regulations and laws are restraint that comes from the outside, something that is outside of us. So they are placed to control us, and it is done by another person. So it's a law that has been enforced upon us, while the Buddhist precept is a demand that we intentionally place upon ourselves. So it is voluntary, we do it voluntarily. And this precept was placed upon ourselves, so it will serve as a kind of self-control. And it's also serve as a foundation for us to be able to deepen our meditation, as we will need to see this three states, three steps of learning, the threefold training, as in the precepts serve as a foundation, as a stepping stone into meditation, and meditation serve as a stepping stone into wisdom as well. And so there are different sets of Buddhist precepts depending upon your male or female, or whether you're monastic or a lay person. There are the 5 precept, 8 precept, 10 wholesome deeds for lay people, as well as for the monastics, novice monks and nuns. They have the 10 precepts, 6 precepts for the 6 samanas, and the precepts for fully ordained monks and nuns. So each of these sets of precepts corresponds with a different type of person, whether you're a renunciant or you're male, female. And for this reason, they are known as the specific precept. In addition to this specific precept, Mahayana Buddhism, or the Buddhism that we belong to, also develop a set of precepts that apply to both monastics and lay people, regardless of their gender, which is called the Bodhisattva precept. So what Bodhisattva precept is about is that besides just seeking liberation or enlightenment of oneself, you will also aid and help others in their process of seeking enlightenment. So that is what a Bodhisattva is, that he or she will aid in other people's enlightenment and liberation as well. So it's not just for oneself, it's for all living beings. And Mahayana is the kind of Buddhism that encourages this, that promotes this. So in Mahayana Buddhism, we have a set of precept that's called the Bodhisattva precept. And this is the poster from the Bodhisattva precept that we had in July. So normally we will have it every other year in Shilai Temple. We will a lot of our senior monks from our headquarters to preside over this. So normally we will have it every 2 years. And Bodhisattva precepts can be broken down into 3 categories as well. So if you're following with this class, there is a trend that is 3, 3, 3, and 3. In fact, when you first became a Buddhist, you will be told to take the take refuge in the triple gem. So that is 3 as well. And the 3 categories of the Bodhisattva precepts are the precepts for proper conduct. That is when you're a novice monk, you'll be told what is the proper way to conduct yourself. And then the second stage, that is the precept for wholesome deeds. When you become a fully ordained monk or nun, you will be taught what deeds are wholesome and what deeds are unwholesome. But after that, when you take the Bodhisattva precept, those precepts are considered precepts for benefiting living beings. And therefore, we can see these steps of first being able to conduct yourself properly, and then being able to do wholesome deeds as well. And third, you will do all of this with the goal of benefiting other living beings. So these Bodhisattva precepts are for all people who wish to be enlightened, to be awakened, to become like the Buddha, and who vow to liberate sentient beings as well. And another set of general precept is contained in this verse that we call the verse of the 7 ancient Buddhas, or this is the common verse or the common teaching of all the past. That is, do nothing that is unwholesome, do all that is wholesome, and pure own mind. And this is the teaching of all Buddhas. In fact, one will even argue that even the future Buddha will be teaching the same thing as well. So do nothing, basically it's do nothing that is evil, do all that is good, purify our own mind. This is the common teaching of all Buddhas, past, present, and future. And for the origin and explanation of Buddhist monastic rules, it is actually collected in a set of texts known as the Vinaya. So Vinaya is also part of the Tripitaka, the 3 collections or the 3 baskets in the meaning in Sanskrit. Vinaya has to do with discipline. And this specific book in the Vinaya, the 4-part Vinaya, records how the Buddha began formulating the monastic rules in the 12th year after his enlightenment. So what that means is that for the first 12 years on the formation of the Buddhist Sangha, or the Buddhist organization of renunciants, of monastics, of monks and nuns, the first 12 years, there's no such thing as a precept. You are here to meditate, you are here to seek enlightenment, you are here to liberate yourself. So there is no strict rules, like there is no set of rigid rules that says that you need to do this, you need to do that in order to become enlightened. But after the 12 years, there's definitely, when there's more people in the Sangha, there will be more issues, there will be conflicts, and etc. So in fact, the first incident that led to the formulation of the precept is that one elder monk named Sudina broke his renunciant vow of celibacy. So we know that when monks and nuns became a renunciant, they should follow with a lifestyle that is, you need to renounce your family life. So that will mean celibacy as well. So the story about Sudina is that he had renounced his family life. And in fact, at first, when he's trying to renounce and join the Sangha, he had asked his parents for their permission. and their parents said that, well, I have one. Actually, it's after that he renounced, his parents sort of regretted it, and he asked him for one of the conditions so that he can sort of remain as a monk. And that condition is that because he is the only child in the family, if he doesn't well have any offsprings, then the bloodline will end. And therefore, he said one of the conditions you need to have bear a child for me. So that is what occurred. This this monk Sudina broke the vow of celibacy, had a child with his ex-wife, and thus prompting the Buddha to institute the first rule of the monastic order, that is, monastics should refrain from sexual conduct. So this is the starting of how the Vinaya had started to being formulated. And the Buddha continued to formulate monastic rules as violation occurs. So it's not like a set of rules that the Buddha sat down and start to write out all the rules that there is, but when the conditions arise or the violations occurred, the Buddha felt that there is a need for this rule. Thereby, he'll be gather all the monks around, and he will say that from now on we will be following with such a rule. And he will say that 3 times to sort of seek the confirmation for the sort of consensus from all of the monastics that are gathered together with him. And for example, the Theravada school or the South Asian tradition has a rule against eating after noon. So basically what that means is that when you have eaten your meal, your lunch, and it's already past noon, you shouldn't be eating dinner or any snacks. And basically you're only allowed to drink water, or well, you're only allowed to drink, not eat, for the rest of the day until the next day. So this rule stipulates that monastic must have their meals between the morning and noon. And all those who take their meals in the afternoon are said to have eaten at an inappropriate time. So this is a set of rules that is still being practiced in South Asia or Southeast Asia even. So when you go to Thailand, the monks, they will be going out on an alms round. They'll take a bowl with them. They'll go out of the temple. They'll go into the town and villages. They'll collect alms, which is basically food. And they will only eat those food that has been donated to them for the rest of the day. So, but the rest of the day, basically what it means is before noon. After the noon, you shouldn't be going out for more food. You'll only be eating those food, and that's it for the rest of your day. And the 5-part Vinaya records why the Buddha formulated that particular precept in the first place. Why does the Buddha restrict his disciples to go out afternoon or in the night to get more food? So it is because in the past there is this monk called Kalodayan. It's an Indian monk, once entered the city of Rajagarha in the late afternoon. Basically what it means is that it's already dark. It's probably in the night to collect alms food. As it was growing dark, a pregnant woman happened to catch a glimpse of Kalodayan and mistook him for a demon. So Kalodayan, this name in Sanskrit, what it means is black, and this monk's complexion is really dark, as in it will shine in the sunlight. So he has a very dark complexion, and in the night, when the pregnant woman caught a glimpse of him, he mistook him to be, because you can only, well, basically, just like the picture here, you can only see his eyes. So that woman mistook him as a ghost or a demon and had a miscarriage. And because of this incident, that the Buddha had stated that no monk should ever go out for food after the noon. And that is because after the noon, or maybe well into the evening and into the night, people might not be able to see that well, and to also reduce the possibility of having this kinds of incidents happen again. And that is because the Buddha felt that collecting alms at people's houses in the afternoon and evening will create too many problems. For example, if we have monastics if monastics are still allowed to go out in the evening, and well, we have people nowadays that will eat supper and snacks all the time, well, the monastics will go out to the temple all the time, and that will create too many, for the Buddha, that will create too many problems for the lay people for them to offer the food. So he created a rule that forbade monks from eating after the noon. You can only drink after that. You couldn't eat anything that requires you to chew. And the primary purpose of the Buddhist monastic rules is to prevent unwholesome conducts and wrongdoings. And for example, in this commentary on the Treatise of 100 Verse, it states that what is the intention behind the formulation of the monastic rules? That it is to adopt something that does not harm all being. And what that means is that, on the other hand, the precept also have the positive quality of benefiting others. So the passive quality of it is to not harm any being, but the positive quality of the precept is to benefit other beings. And the explanation of the treatise on the summary of the Mahayana doctrine states that in formulating the monastic rules, the Buddha, or the Tathagata, another name of the Buddha intention was twofold. There's two intention. First is for the sake of all Sravakas, or all disciples of the Buddha, to liberate themselves. That is basically a self-oriented objective, that is to be able to liberate oneself. And the second was for bodhisattvas to liberate others. So as mentioned, in Buddhism, there's Theravada as well as Mahayana. Sravakas in the scripture is a word used to describe the Theravadan followers or Theravadan disciples. So first is for the Theravadan followers or disciples to liberate themselves. The second is for the bodhisattvas, the Mahayana followers, to liberate others and to liberate themselves as well. So there's a twofold objective or goal to it for the formulation of the precept. So in fact, if we look at the Chinese word that's used to describe a precept, basically two words, that is 戒律. And what 戒 and 律 means that the first character, 戒, refers to a voluntary willingness to observe the precept, while the second character, the second word, 律, suggests an adherence to an external norm or standard. And in fact, in the Tripitaka, Vinaya is translated as 律 because it is an external writing, an external set of rules that is imposed upon us. But if we are willingly observing this precept, we are willingly upholding it, and then it becomes 戒. It becomes an internal thing. It becomes an internal set of rules that we abide to. So the various rules, regulations, and in fact punishments for the monastic orders are called 律. But when they are able to be obeyed and gladly and voluntarily observed, they can be called 戒. So there is two aspects as well, an internal aspect as well as factor. So another explanation is that 戒 refers to those precepts in which the Buddha drew attention to the wrong actions of the non-Buddhists as a way to instruct and admonish his own disciples. So whenever something happens within the religious sphere of ancient India when there are some issues that arise in other relig other organizations of religions, those wrongdoings, the Buddha would start to instruct and to also tell his own disciples to not do those. And these precepts apply to both monastics and lay people and are quite different from the monastic rules that are Lü, which were instituted as monastics committed specific offenses. So when the monastic community or the Buddhist monastics do these offenses themselves and were instituted into the rules as a result, so those are called Lü. And there are no punishment attached to violating a jie, but rather they are ways to improve ourselves for our own effort. But once you had violated something such as a Lü, for example, to violate the monastic rules of not being able to uphold celibacy, another issue by itself. And when speaking about Buddhist precepts, there are some of us, but maybe there are a lot of learners of Buddhism will feel confused. Why do the laity have the 5 precept, Bodhisattva precept, and 8 precept, and so on, while the monastic and have the monks precept and nuns precept and novice precept? And one of the reasons why it will be asked is because a monk's precept, basically there's 240, 250 precepts in total. A nun will have 400 plus. And this is all due to historical development within Buddhism. Some might ask, why does Buddhism need such a large body of precept? So for the Venerable Master, actually precept is quite simple and should be simple, just as a student must go through different curriculums of primary, secondary, and college education. So the different sets of Buddhist precepts are intended for different levels of development. So when you start to learn about Buddhism, we will encourage you to take the refuge in the Triple Gem, so that serve as a basis for our learning. And then when you had deepened your faith in your practices and in Buddhism, we will encourage you to take the 5 precepts. And when you feel that you are able to serve others in the process as well, we will encourage you to take the Bodhisattva precept. So in this process of learnings, there are many steps that we can take to be able to improve ourselves. So, but for all the precepts, the 5 precepts, although it's basic, it also serves as a foundation, because the 5 precepts is the basis for proper conduct, and the Bodhisattva precepts are practical application of the Bodhisattva path to attain awakening while liberating sentient beings. So Bodhisattva precept is a twofold kind of practice. You are benefiting yourself in the process while in the process benefiting others. So while serving others, you are actually gaining merits and also the right conditions for your own self-liberation. And the 5 precepts also offer lay people a convenient way to learn and experience the life of a monastic. So what the 8 precept is for is, once you have taken maybe the 5 precept or the 8 precept, the 5 precept or the Bodhisattva precept, and you wanted to sort of experience the kind of lifestyles that a monastic would have. And the Buddha formulated this 8 precept during his lifetime. During the ancient times, if you don't have the right condition to become a monk or a nun, but you still want to experience the kind of lifestyle, you will be choosing to spend 1 or 2 of your days within a month to be able to live within a temple or a monastery, and you will take the 8 precept during that one day. And the eighth precept is you only need to observe the eighth precept for a day and a night. So once the day is over, you will be considered the eighth precept that you have taken being relinquished. And the next time that you want to take the eighth precept, you need to retake again. So that is, the eighth precept is a convenient means for lay people to be able to experience the monastic lifestyle. And in fact, for our lay association, a Buddhist Light International Association, we will be conducting or organizing this eighth precept from time to time so that our members will be able to have a time to experience the kind of lifestyles that the monastic community have. And another common question is in the five precept, because we know the five precept is no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and the fifth one is no taking of intoxicants. And in ancient times, it was called no drinking of alcohol. But now we broaden it to encompass all intoxicants. That is no taking of any drugs. And one of this question is drinking alcohol really such a serious problem? And to answer that, the Venerable Master said, it is important to understand how the Buddha formulated precept. So if an action is inherently unwholesome, something that is totally unwholesome, that's really bad, the prohibition against such a behavior is known as a natural precept, as in when you're killing someone, when you're stealing, when you're having sexual misconduct or lying, those actions violate the natural law, and it is something that will naturally another person, and you'll harm yourself as well, and forever change the moral character of that person who commits them. And these behavior are immoral in its nature, whether you are a Buddhist or not. And so Buddhism formulates the precept, and the different nations, different states also enacts those as law. And the precepts prohibiting such actions are called natural precept, as in it's a cultural norm and everyone accepts it as something that is unwholesome to be done. But if an action is not inherently unwholesome, but allows criticism or tempts one to act in an unwholesome way, for example, drinking alcohol, the prohibition against such behavior are known as preclusive precept. For example, drinking alcohol in and of itself, it's not evil, unwholesome, etc. But doing so can easily cause you to lose your better judgment, and thus you might conduct killing, stealing, engage in sexual misconduct, or lie in the process. So in fact, nowadays we see a lot of driving under the influence, and a lot of lives will be affected, and some people lost their life in the process as well. So this is why the prohibition against intoxicants is listed after the four fundamental are considered to be natural precept. And the purpose of the preclusive precepts is also to prevent outsiders, therefore non-Buddhists, from criticizing, because they mostly deal with minor faults that society does not generally consider them harmful. And these preclusive precepts were formulated by the Buddha in response to a particular circumstances or local condition, usually being more minor in character than those of the major or natural precepts. Besides the precept of against intoxicant, against taking of intoxicants, other preclusive precepts include the selling. Is when you're monastic, you shouldn't be doing business or digging up the ground, hence injure causing injury to living beings that are residing in the ground. However, the Buddha made a special effort to include over intoxications in the five precepts, because only by preventing such a transgression can the other precept be kept safe. So, but precept of selling goods and in fact digging up the ground to injure, causing injury to living beings, that is only a monastic rule. So it only applies to the monastic community, but that is still a very minor precept. And in fact, the development of Chinese Buddhism had caused a change in that as well. As in, for Chinese Buddhists, because we had adopted a vegetarian lifestyle, we had also started to farm, but I think I'll need to cover that on another class. As in, this has to do more with cultural and historical development of Buddhism in China. And the Buddha considered all aspects of the precept and monastic rules to be fully and completely considered. So it is not a partial consideration, but the Buddha had thought of every aspect of the monastic lives, as well as every aspect of the lay community's life. The Buddhist precept and monastic rules are not merely negative prohibition against things. There's also permissive aspects of it as well. And this example, of course, it's a much more extreme one, which is if a bodhisattva who observes the precept and sees a robber preparing to kill living beings, the bodhisattva will choose to end the life of the robber out of the sense of compassion, rather than having the robber. In the process, he would rather end the life of this one person to save the others. And in fact, in the sutra, there is a case where in one of the past life of Sakyamuni Buddha, he had became a merchant and had traveling with the 500 other merchants together on a ship. And he knew that one of his colleagues, one of his friends, that was also a merchant, wanted to murder all the 500 people in the ship to be able to get all the goods, all the earnings for himself. So once he knew that, and he knew that he couldn't stop him, he had chose to end his life instead. So this is one of the example that has been given. Of course, there is karmic retribution from that as well, but a bodhisattva would rather sacrifice himself to have other suffer the consequences instead. And a bodhisattva would not be able to bear allowing the robber to create such a negative karma as well. And he knew that he would also be reborn in hell. Because if you think about it, one person killing the other 500 people, the kind of karma need to bear will be huge. And so the bodhisattva would instead bear the killing of one person instead of having the robber killing 500 people and have the negative karma for that as well. So this is an example when the precept against killing can sort of be suspended. So of course, when you out of compassion, you will have the sort of spiritual gain for it, but you will also need to suffer from the consequence of killing this one person. So it is in the karmic rule, it is still equal, but because out of compassion, a bodhisattva would rather sacrifice himself instead. And also there are some points of comparison between the Buddhist, also the law of ordinary society. For example, some criminal act against the state by murder, assault, robbery, rape, fraud, public drunkenness, and those, there are also those violations are also found among the 5 precepts: no killing, no stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and also in taking of intoxicants. But however, there are major differences between the Buddhist teaching or the Buddhist precept and the secular law. Because according to the law, a criminal intent is not necessarily evident of a guilt. For one can only be convicted of criminal conduct. But in Buddhist precept or in the Buddhist practice, intention itself is sufficient for there to be a violation of the precept. So even though you don't look like you had done anything on the outside, other people might not be able to see that you had done anything bad. But once you have that intention, or the mental karma, as we call it, once you have the intention to kill, to steal, to lie, to have sexual misconduct, to also take huge amounts of intoxicants, that intention itself is a violation already, because in the three types of karma, we always say there's physical karma, there's verbal karma, as well as mental. So even though you had not done anything, but if you have a negative intention when, well, before you had done that, that is also considered a violation already. So Buddhism places an extraordinary degree of emphasis upon the intention behind the transgression. So therefore, when we are considering whether we have violated something or not, it's not just about what we did to other people. It's not the things that we do and can be seen on the outside, but also the intention that we have in our mind. If, for example, you had done an action of killing, but just like a bodhisattva, if that intention of killing is out of compassion, and then the intention will be a positive. If although you are doing something good on the outside, you are trying to help someone out, but in your intention, you want to gain some favor, you have other intentions in your mind, then that will be probably a negative one if you not have the right intentions. So each precept and monastic rules include details as to what is permitted and also what is prohibited, and what means to obey it and what it means to break it. So owing to difference in motives, manner, and results of breaking the same precept can be seen to different degrees of violation with varying forms of repentance. So more to do with the precept, as in it's been detailed in in extensively, as in what you did is what degree of violation and what you need to do to repent it to be able to be of pure conduct. So in this way, the Buddhist precept represents a more thorough approach to jurisdiction. And for observing the precepts today, because this topic is also the right form or right precept for the right time, being able to dynamically apply the spirit of precept to sometimes permit a certain action, and also to forbid certain action is a defining characteristic Mahayana approach. And Mahayana is not just to be able to benefit oneself from this spiritual practice, but also to benefit other beings. And these other beings are not necessarily Buddhists. We need to be able to think about other human beings that are non-Buddhist, as well as other living beings that are non-human. So this approach is grounded in the Mahayana vow, benefit other sentient beings, and the practice of compassion as well. So this is the same attitude that humanistic Buddhism has towards Buddhist precept. And in humanistic Buddhism, it is more emphasized upon how can we benefit human beings, or how we as a person be able to practice Buddhism in our daily life, in all the aspects of our human life. So the fact that the Buddha's formulation of the precept can be at times permissive and also prohibitive proves that the precepts are not immutable or unchangeable. They vary according to the particular circumstances when and where sometimes some things happen. And it also depends upon who is. So it will vary a lot when the conditions change as well. And the Buddha amended the monastic rules several times his lifetime to fit the specific situations. For example, there was a rule that monks should only possess a single set of robes. But when the Venerable Aniruddha wished to journey south to mediate a dispute, the Buddha stipulated that monks could possess more than one robe because in the south there's more rain, the weather it's much more humid. You will need an extra robe to be able to change. And on another occasion, when some devotees offered alms bowl to the Venerable Ananda, the Buddha relaxed the rule regarding the keeping of alms bowl. So this is clearly the minor precepts that are governing the minutiae or the details of daily life. And the minor precept could be changed when times arise. For example, in Mahayana Buddhism or in East Asian Buddhism, you will not see a lot of people still holding towards the precept of not eating afternoon. And in fact, in humanistic Buddhism, because we still have a lot of things to do after the noon, and in fact, we have a lot of things to do into the night. So our founder had constantly teaching us or urging us to not follow on with the rule of not eating after noon, and he encourages to eat all our 3 meals, our breakfast, our lunch, as well as our dinner. And because for a person to be able to eat all those 3 meals and eat it on time and on a regular basis, you will be able to have a good habit, and you will also be able to serve your community that you're serving much better. Because if you think about it, if you really want to uphold the precept of not eating after noon, then you might be sluggish and not be able to have a lot of energy in afternoon, as well as the adaptation for the Buddhist community in the present day. And that has a lot to do with the historical aspect as well. But due to time constraint, I probably won't be covering that too much for today. So for the precepts today, it is obvious that some Buddhist precepts, rules and precepts that were created more than 2,500 years ago are no longer suitable for the demands of modern society. But though the Venerable Master would say that the fundamental precepts can be retained, some of the very minor precepts should be changed to meet the modern needs or to be otherwise adjusted to be flexible in different circumstances or local customs and climate or geography changes through time. So this is preferable to the blind observance of the outmoded precedents, as in if we are trying to follow suit with it, then we might not be able to develop from that shell. So without adjusting the precept for novice monks in particular, no progress would be possible. And these are the areas that we should face with a renewed sense of purpose. And only by recognizing the positive aspects of the Buddhist rules and precepts will we avoid forsaking the spirit of why the Buddha formulated precept in such an integrated and skillful and adaptive manner. So I think why the novice monk's precept was mentioned in here is that because rule of not taking a meal after the noon is part of the novice monk's pre. But I think that will be all for today. So there is still 5 more minutes before we go. I don't know if we have any questions that had arise when we're going through our class. So I don't know if there's any questions we have over here regarding the precepts. Yes. Sure. Yeah. I will send. I will let you know which website that you can register on. So for those that are not able to make it in person after this, there's always an option of being able to follow with our classes on Zoom. And in fact, if you miss the classes on Zoom as well, there is also the recordings that you are able to listen to. Yep. So, any questions regarding Buddhist precepts? Yes. What kind? So, I think in the more modern interpretation of it is that if a sexual a sexual activity, a sexual action is done when it's not consensual, when it's not agreed upon between two parties, when it's forced upon you, then that will be considered sexual misconduct. And you will even I will even argue that when you touch another person appropriately, not necessarily in the sexual way, but if you touch another inappropriately, that is to say you have the wrong intention, when you're doing that, that is also a violation of sexual misconduct as well. So there is a question online that says, is ill speech, gossiping part of the 5 precept? So in the 5 precept, there's only lying, as in we should refrain from lying. So basically, when gossiping, if you are saying something that is untrue, then of course you're hurting another person, then that will be considered as lie as well. But gossiping is actually encompass, it's part of the 10 unwholesome acts, as in if you're observing the 5 precept and you vow to also observe the 10 wholesome acts as well. The 10 wholesome acts has 4 precepts or actions that are considered to be verbal. That is no lying, no harsh speech, no divisive speech, as well as no gossiping as well. No gossiping as well as no flattery. So basically, not in particularly in the 5 precept, but it's actually encompassed in the 10 wholesome deeds. So another question is, yeah, it's available on Amazon as well, or a local library. Yeah, if your library have that. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay. Any more questions regarding today's class or anything else in that matter? So, okay, if there's none, then this would committed relationship, sorry. So in Buddhism, it's not necessarily an action between married couples. So as mentioned in the more I would say in a much more modern context is that if you're not married but it's still consensual, it will still be okay. It is still a wholesome act, as in you have approval or permission from both parties. So it's not an action. It's not that a sexual act can only be done after a marriage, but it should be to be committed. Well, basically, I will go back into the statement. It needs to be consensual. And both parties, it's consensual as in you're not take well, if another thing is that you're not drinking or under the influence as well, you need to be really clear. But basically, that because the sexual misconduct is a precept for lay people, we don't want to be too restrictive in that matter. As in, you will feel that okay, only I can only have that after marriage, after we sort of open that up for interpretation, as in it needs to be consensual, as in when it's not consensual, you're violating another person, you are forcing that upon another person, you're hurting the other person. So if it's consensual, everyone is okay about it, then it is not a violation, but it might be not as helpful for your meditation, but that is for another state, for another stage, for to be covered in the meditation section, as in that is more to do with not having any desires and lust instead of the precept. So that will be in another class. Yeah, but we can talk more about that after this. Yeah. Okay. So another question: would killing insects be considered a type of killing? Um, yes and no. Well, basically, physically killing another person, not another person, or a living being, is killing, but no, because if you don't have the intention of killing it, for example, you're not intentionally swatting or slapping on a mosquito or stepping on an insect or an ant, then it's okay. You're just walking on the street, you accidentally stepped on some insects. You might not know, but if you know, if you saw the killing afterwards, you can always repent. But the action of killing, if accompanied by the intention of killing, then that will be considered that will be considered a violation. So killing of insects, of animals, if there's no intention to it, you can always repent. But killing of a person, that is another matter, because even though if you have no intention, but you have accidentally killed a person, you will still be prosecuted and will have the consequences, well, legally speaking. So basically, yes, if you kill an insect, that is a killing, but if you don't have the intention to it, you can always repent afterwards. So hopefully that answers that question. I don't know questions online. Okay, right. Okay, so if that is all, then we will call this a day. But of course, you can also pose any further questions on the Google Classroom after you have heard this recording. You're not able to in person as well as on Zoom. You can always post it in the Google Classroom. So that's it for today. And next week, I believe it's the same time as well. Next week would be on next week is on the 30th. 30th, we will still be having a class. So same time again, we will have it in person as well as on Zoom. So thank you everyone for joining in with our class today, and take care. We will see you every week. 阿弥陀佛。